Sunsets Every Day is the latest film by the Amsterdam-based artist Basir Mahmood. His film, which has its international premiere at IFFR, was commissioned by In Between Art Film for the project Mascarilla 19, Codes of Domestic Violence, and marks his first appearance at IFFR. Daniel Blanga Gubbay is a Brussels-based researcher in political philosophy and performance. He is artistic co-director of Kunstenfestival des Arts, and he teaches political philosophy for the arts at the Académie des Beaux-Arts in Brussels. In 2014, he founded Aleppo, a curatorial platform for public programs in performance and discursive practices.
Hello, Basir, Basir Mahmood. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you, starting from this work that you've done. And I would like to start by one of the questions that I have in relation to it. In the way of producing this work, you commission a production team in Lahore to create and film a repeated scene of domestic violence. And as you were describing, it's based on instructions and images of injuries that women shared. And the specificity of the film is that while the main crew is busy with the task, there are like two cameras operator that are constantly filming the process and the element of the set. And somehow I had the impression that this is part of your growing interest in making your own work. In not making your own work yourself, that somehow you draw larger parameters within which the work may be performed in collaboration and involving the process of other people that are present in the work, that somehow you expand the notion of authorship. And it made me think about, for example, in a previous work of yours, Good Ended Happily in 2018, you had a film crew in Lahore-based film industry that was collaborating with you, and you assigned them the task of recreating and filming the after images of the American forces operation that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden. So this idea of instructing a crew to film and somehow filming them while this is happening. My question then is more specifically in relation to this new work that you've done, is that there's a new strong element. Indeed, we see the practice of shooting something that is not shown. So the process of staging the violence is what generates the image on the screen, but the act itself is completely hidden from the viewer. And I would like maybe to start from here, from this notion of invisibility or invisibilized scene and the political value of what is out of frame.
Yeah, as you said, I think over the period of time, my interest started in handing over my process or my filming or the idea of the work to somebody else, and depending on them or their interpretation of that idea. And that started off earlier from when I left making sculptures and started more into moving images. And slowly from moving images, I started to travel and started making works that are not related to me, but they are kind of distant. So the camera was kind of first for me was a mean to capture something that is on a distance. So there was from me, because I was coming from a background of a sculpture, it was a big thing that I was sort of distance myself from the material of the work. So there was no physical interaction into making something or making a work of art. This is how the kind of a journey of it started. And slowly from various works, I started depending more and more on people, and also with time started gaining more confidence on the things or my own understanding that how do I want to make work. And I have to say, now it's like, it feels to me like a normal process, even though I feel it's a very different way of approaching image making. But I felt now I feel like this is the only thing I'm familiar with. And with this work, when I was offered this commission to make a film on domestic violence, this is one of those ideas which I never ever thought in my practice that I would ever make, because being, I don't know, as a male artist, I was never very comfortable in touching upon something that is directly dealing with domestic violence. And I felt probably this is a very personal thing for me, because the other artists who were also commissioned with me, when I spoke to them about this uncomfort that I was facing, they were not really, they couldn't understand that. So maybe I thought maybe this is where I come from. Maybe that uncomfort comes from that male dominating society where I come from. So when I started making research on domestic violence, there was nothing there that I could capture or say. It was when I was go and look for films or images or interpretation or the stories or the narrative, it was directly about the violence, and there was so much has been said on, so much has been shown or made on it. And for me, this indirect method of making was that I wanted to capture uh, things, objects, or the people who going to witness the violence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the idea was that I wanted a film crew to be, I wanted them to put into a condition where they not just create, but also digest or observe or take in the 16 hours of domestic violence. And I tell you, when I was connected to the set through my phone, I was seeing everything on my phone, and it was very loud when this action was taking place. And I could see on those people also when they were seeing in front of them the continuous repetition, which was also a continuous attempt, because I wanted them to be exhausted or have certain sort of I don't know, tiredness sort of with time started to appear into the film. And then with having these two other cameramen who were not part of the main crew, having them record for continuous for maybe or exactly for 16 hours or even more, I wanted them also to get into that zone of continuously recording, or this pressure of continuous recording, slowly having also them being bored of recording the same things. Mm-hmm. And because the camera had to run, I was hoping that other details might start to occur, which me as a maker or somebody else as a maker might not be thinking of. Again, the scenes where you saw of them peeling bananas and recording that, or showing little objects, or because they were on themselves going into so much into details that they started to interpret things on their own. Yeah. So this is what I was hoping. But also I think if I would have made this work maybe 5 or 10 years back, before the works that you have mentioned, I would have not have enough confidence to leave the whole process on somebody else and wait for something that I was expecting to occur.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing is that for me, what was interesting is that this question of delegating the work to someone is not only part of the structural conditions in which we are working at the moment, and this need of inventing forms of working from a distance, but that somehow, as you were saying, was already inscribed in your own practice. So what does it mean to work in collaboration and open up the process to someone else who might interfere as well in the work? And there was something that you were mentioning right now that really, for me, it's very important in this work and in your practice in general, which is the notion of witness or witnessing, and how I have the impression that in this specific work you are expanding this notion of witness, because somehow, indeed, we see the camera of the two persons who are following the crew, who follows the scene, and you refer to it as a kind of forensic gaze. So almost the idea of filming everything to reconstruct something that cannot be completely reconstructed. And in the film, in the movie, we see somehow different forms of being witnessed. On the one side, we see the objects that are presented somehow in front of the camera, and they are presented as witnesses of the missing scene somehow. But then on the second level, there's the crew and the actors who are there as well, witnessing the scene. And what I found particularly strong in this work is that, again, there's this idea from the crew and the actors that are sitting on chairs at the beginning, that they are waiting and looking. And it reminded me the importance of the dimension of waiting in your aesthetic, or the element of chairs. For example, I think at Thank You for Coming, in 2013, I think, where you gather a group of people. But what I found crucial here in their position and in this idea of waiting is that the position of the chairs mirrors our position as spectators, raising a question about our own responsibility as witnesses of something that we cannot see, but that we know is happening. So I would like maybe to expand a bit of this, the complexity of witnessing that exists within this work.
I think, again, before the viewer, I also positioned myself first as an observer. I mean, this is the idea that I had a few years back, that the work that I'm making is already there. It already exists. It's just that I happen to be the first person to see it and also form it into, or articulate it into a form of an image or a work. This is why, certain works like A Message to the Sea, which I made when I was in Japan, or the work in Turkey, where the work which I made there was a context which was already there. So when I was traveling in different contexts of different residencies, I was traveling myself and seeing certain situations, certain contexts being there, and then recording it. But when I stopped traveling, I still was kind of this interest sort of remained, that I wanted to be somebody who only observes. So I'm only not entirely creating something, but being the person who observes. I have a parameter, as you said, I have a parameter, I have a set understanding of the context that I'm getting into. But within that parameter, I want to involve camera as probably on my position as somebody who is creating, but also observing something being created. So, the work, let's say Good Ended Happily, was a film where camera was an active participant who was moving within the space, and everybody was working for it. In this case, in this film, the main camera, you don't see the footages of it. You don't see the main action. You see these other cameras which are kind of there, which probably not other people were also not taking attention to, because the notion of act or action or cut was not sort of attached to these two cameramans, or they were free to go into that space and to go into those details. And when you expand the main event, there's always this time within where people are waiting for something to happen. And that has always been kind of my interest. Earlier, when I started making work with people, with a group of people, when I would bring them into the space, they would act, but when they are not acting, I would also observe little details on them, which I would want them ideally to perform into the film also. So this is how I started to sort of open that space of filming in which all these people are there for. But then there is another other areas where they are eating, or they are waiting, or they are talking to each other, or they are smoking, other forms. And also with there's certain changes that happen with time when you are on the set, when you are there for 12 hours or 15 hours or 16 hours. When you come, you are more energetic, but slowly with time, you start to exhaust yourself. You start to sort of sweat. And I mean, this is something which I notice now, that I've been continuously filming most of the time a group of people. There's never really a central character into my film. And also I've been filming most of the time in very hot, warm conditions. I don't know why, but I started to like that. Even when I'm filming something in Amsterdam, I wait for winter's weather where I could really exhaust actors to sort of really, I don't know, because I feel when they come on set, or even a non-actor, when they come on set, they are very conscious of the position of the camera or me looking at them, and which I want sometime to ease down, but sometime also I use it to uncomfort them. There was a time when I was using consciously big cameras to record my work, even though I could have recorded them into smaller cameras, but because having those big cameras of making actors uncomfortable. I mean, these are the different strategies that I take. Again, not to just influence the film or the narrative of the film, but also the surroundings of it that might come here and there within the film itself.
Yeah, and I have the impression that here, as you are saying, I mean, we are looking at people who are waiting for something, and this indeed is something that was present in some works of yours before. But I have also the impression that here it acquires a very strong political dimension as well, in respect to the structural dimension that you are somehow denouncing about domestic violence as not an episodic element, but something that is constructed upon condition of male-dominated society, and that somehow is witnessing kind of waiting moment about something that is not simply an accident, but something that is built upon constructions that are there, and which gives to the fact of waiting a very specific and charged dimension.
Yeah, when even before when I got this commission and I started to think about my work and also my practice, I started to somehow think in terms of genders, like male and female gender, because of the context of the work. And when I went back to my work and the processes of my film, I was surprised that most of the time, and almost all of the time, there is always male labor or cameraman or crew always involved, and most of the time it's only males who are present in the film. So this was also one of the conditions which I did not want it to force, but I knew that it's going to be there, because the camera crew or the technical crew or the people who are working in the studio in a country like Pakistan where the film is shot, it's most of the time these are the hardcore jobs sort of associated to male most of the time. So I knew that the witness, people who are going to be there are going to be male. That is something that I didn't want it to push too much into my narrative. I didn't want it to replace only the male gaze, even though it comes, and I knew that is going to come. But I wanted to, I was aware that it's not only the crew, but I knew where the film is going to be shot in the studio. There's also most of the time other people who are working there in other studios or offices, or passerby, or some people come just to see the shooting. I knew that these people are going to come anyways. And there's one thing that influenced the work is also the coronavirus condition. That was very interesting. That's why you see the chairs are placed on a distance when they come and sit, like 1.5 meter distance. And there was another thing that also influenced the film, which I did not thought, was that when we went out to work with actors, we could only have people who knew each other, like most of the time couple, because it was a male and female who were performing. So naturally they had to be people who were already in a relationship or knew each other, like brothers, sisters, or cousins, or boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband and wife, or whatever, because otherwise they were not comfortable to act with somebody who they do not know. Yeah. And that is something which I got to know like just 2-3 days before the shoot. I didn't want it to push it into the film eventually, but these are the things that you do, and sometimes something else comes up, and then probably it would feed into another work into the future.
Mm-hmm. And there's another element that for me was very strong in experiencing this new work, is the sound experience, and somehow the selective sound experience that you are creating for the viewer. That somehow we experience sound in such a material and detailed somehow, and sometimes disconnected or almost zooming on specific elements on the scene. And among the different sounds that are present, I think that for me what was very strong was the sound of filming. Somehow there's so much about the zooming or the focusing or the moving of the tripods that is present, and it renders the camera extremely present as a further witness. So it opens up indeed the camera as a gaze. But I have the impression it also alludes a lot to the act of labor, or filming as the act of labor, or the material and structural presence of the act of filming, which resonate a lot with what you are mentioning as well, with your interest in labor or the detail of people sweating on the set as a kind of material condition of what does it mean to film. And I have the impression that beside the human labor that is present here, it's really open as well on the same mechanics of filming as a kind of form of labor that is present in the work.
Yeah, I think the sound I was when I filmed I when I was finished with the editing and I wanted to hand over the film to somebody else to do the sound, but I was not really sure what would I my brief would be. What do I want into the sound? First, in the beginning I thought it's nice that it's a complete quiet film without sound, but then I started focusing on little clashes, little details of things turning, or even there's a sound of glasses who vibrates and touch each other. So I thought maybe with the sound I could bring viewers attention to certain things where there's certain vibrations, certain clashes, certain materials that are moving to sort of maybe create some sort of attention into the film. This is one film where I felt when I got an idea, when I was given a commission to the film, when I started making a research, I was so disturbed because I have never worked with so disturbing context than this before. And it was also the time because I was during the coronavirus lockdown, and the film deals with those victims within the time of coronavirus when people were bound to stay home with their partners who are who are abusive or whatever. And I was also in that condition myself, and consuming those images, coming to the studio every day and looking for images that would disturb me, that would create certain impact. Not me like that, but it would definitely be an images of violence or something. It was kind of making a research into a thing that has gone wrong. Something is disturbing there that you are looking for. So it always become an intention to look for a conflict or some, I don't know, wait. So anyways, when I started making research, it started to have any more impact on me, but I didn't want it also at the same time to become used to of it. So I remember so the production, the company, the foundation in between art films who were commissioning the film, I wrote them that I want to make it now. I didn't want it to get used to of those images or the context or I wanted also. This is probably the reason that on all the other films that you have seen, there's not this amount of action into the film, and in this one there's not this much amount of camera moving, and this I don't know, this is what was the reason for me to use this sound also, that I wanted sound to sort of create some tension into the film that I felt when I was researching or reading about upon domestic violence at that time.
Well, I indeed have the impression that sound is constructed upon the kind of its own dramaturgy of preparation somehow, that something is about to happen. And this is what made it for me politically very sharp in the fact that the central point of the work is not only domestic violence, but how what does it mean is happening, though you don't see it, and how do you position yourself in knowing and in perceiving, in sensing that something is happening, even though is an invisible act for some people, because maybe it happens in private spaces. But how do you position yourself when you listen? How do you position when you see something is building up, when you see that the structural conditions of a society are going in the direction of replicating a kind of act, and how to break or to indeed to position within such a context.
Also, I think for me, everything that as an image maker or somebody who's using video or film, and when I approach a film set and with the certain context of the story, I am also going into a lot of technical language of it, that how all the technicalities would form the image that I want to make. And with this film also, I wanted that mechanism to be present, this mechanism of camera, the roles of different people. That's why you see these people in the beginning of the film who are stretching the rope, or there's a certain work or there's certain labor that is doing something apart from the violence, but at the same time observing or creating a mechanism for that violence to take place.
Yeah.
That could be in the society, that could be the society itself or the family structure or whatever, but there's certain system that I wanted to involve within the film also, that sort of takes you away from the violence, but then also comes back to you, and that there's a certain mechanism that is going around around the narrative of the film that they are all sort of focusing or filming to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was indeed this continuous shift, values between, I mean, from something, let's say, episodic to something structural, something that somehow is built within a kind of structure, and that indeed then raises a question how what's your responsibility as witness or participant of this structure. And there's also one last point that for me is always very strong in your work, and also in this specific one, which is how you're able to reflect on the notion of authorship as an author, as an artist. And once again, it becomes a kind of expanded authorship. At the very beginning, you were mentioning indeed your way of working in giving instructions, but at the same time living a kind of space or assigning certain parameters, and then trying to navigate within a kind of situation that you constructed. And very often I have the impression, and here as well, that via expanding this authorship or this idea of authorship, you are becoming witness and observer of your own work.
Yeah, I think that comes from my past, let's say, practice of being a sculptor. I think it's just, I hate to say this, but it's really like you put certain material into a certain condition and wait for it, how it's going to respond. And, being a filmmaker, even though I'm giving it away so much, but at the same time, I'm feeling so much control, so much power that I have onto the film, because most of the time I'm editing it myself. I can choose the images that would stay, or the sequences or stories, or the narrative that would stay and that could go away. So I have a certain control into the film. I know eventually it's in my control, so why not to give it away? And again, even when I left making sculpture was the reason where I come from. I think the kind of a practice I grew up in Pakistan, surrounded by, I don't know if your context of miniature painting or, certain labor intensive work that I myself was engaged into, and where I come from, that started to affect my thinking that why can't I only think about my work and somebody else do it? It's not just giving it to somebody else, but also finding a narrative or a structure that what is my role and what is their role. Why am I giving it to somebody and want them to make? It's not just the product itself, but I also wanted to focus on the procedure of coming to that object, coming to that film. And that's how I started sort of opening up the procedures. I started opening up things. And I'm an artist who is continuously observing things. My actors, when they are performing for the film and they are not, when I'm at home, when I'm doing something else, when I'm thinking, I'm continuously questioning everything around me. And this is why with every film that I'm making, I start to open up that parameter, even sometime including myself, which I did in Moon Sighting, is one of the work in which I appear also. So I'm constantly finding ways where I could really open up that narrative, which can include so many other things into it, and let the narrative or the interpretation of the narrative to be open. So far, the context that I have touched are very specific because they are being commissioned, or I have certain things that I have observed or noticed. But with time, I want to I hope in the future, I could, make certain narratives that could be open to interpretation even further without having any context. But that becomes very difficult, because when it is very confusing for the people I collaborate with. They ask me if I'm a director or I'm a producer or, I'm a writer, what my role is. So, so even if I have to really make them into so much confidence, I also feel so much confidence that I can open up my narratives even further for interpretation for the viewers. That somehow happened in Moon Sighting, where I wanted viewer identity to play a role. If you are a British, you see that work differently, or if you come from Mirpur community, you see that work differently. Anyways, that's a different work. But this is something I am sort of hoping that I could involve also viewer equally, their identity, their position, or I don't know, maybe in this work, maybe your gender sort of plays a role to make you consume these images very differently. Because my wife was more disturbed when she saw this film than that was very that touched me so much that okay, there's something in the work.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thanks so much, Basir. It was such a pleasure to be in conversation with you, as always.